So many people have so many questions around no-code these days, and most people who have a business idea are going on YouTube and looking at videos like these to understand whether it's a good fit for their next startup business. So in this video, I'm going to be creating a pros and cons of no-code for building your next startup idea. And if you stick around until the end, I even have a special surprise for you. Welcome back, my friends, to the Startup Studio. I'm Christian Peverelli, the co-founder of We Are No-Code, an online institute for non-technical entrepreneurs. And we give tips and tricks to entrepreneurs to learn how to build startups from the ground up, leveraging no-code tools. So if you haven't already, like and subscribe to this channel so that we can continue delivering awesome tips for you. Okay, now before we jump into the pros and cons, I want to talk a little bit of context and explain how the market has matured in the startup world in general. 15 years ago, when I started my first tech startup, it was pretty easy to raise money with just a great idea, right? So you could just have a good idea, maybe a solid team of people who seemed like they could execute on that idea, and you were able to raise money. But over the past 15 years, a lot has changed in this industry, and investors are increasingly investing in startups that generate revenue. There was actually a study done by a company called Wing Capital, which is a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley, that looked at all the deals and how it was evolving over time. And what they saw is that in 2010, only a small proportion of deals, 9% of seed deals, were going towards companies that generated revenue. Now, by 2017, that number was already 50%. And today we're talking about 75% of all deals probably going towards startups that generate revenue. So the question is, if you don't have technical skills, but you have a great idea and you can't raise money from investors to be able to build that idea, then how do you go about the early steps of building your startup? So basically these days, investors invest in revenue. And if you want to get their attention, you need to get that revenue, which means you need to build the first product. You need to go out there and get first paying customers. And then you need to create a plan to show them how you're going to scale out that revenue over time, which is what they're really interested in when they're investing in any company. Now, the pros and cons are directly linked to achieving those goals in your startup, right? Now let's talk about some of the pros of building your startup with no-code. So the first pro of building your startup leveraging no-code tools is that it is so much cheaper. Here, let's just talk about your options. You could go for a cheap developer. Usually that ends up in very buggy code. You could hire great developers, and that will cost you a huge amount of money. You could learn how to code, which will probably take about 6 years, or you could look for a technical co-founder. Now, the risk with that is that you don't find the right person, and it takes a really long time to find the right co-founder to become your chief technology officer. And when we talk about building with no-code, we're talking about only paying a monthly subscription to a service, to a no-code tool that you're gonna use to do that. So it can range anywhere from $0 at first, all the way to maybe $100 per month. Usually we're really talking about $20 subscriptions for some of the major platforms. But as you can imagine, the time of a programmer is about, in Silicon Valley, a really good programmer is going to be around $150, $200, $300 per hour. And of course, overseas, you can get much cheaper, but oftentimes that comes with quality lowering. So with no code, you can literally build out a startup, and we have in the past. You can build SaaS tools. You can build entire marketplaces for like $40, $100. So what I usually say is that it is 10 to 20 times cheaper than hiring developers, because you're building it yourself. And if you're hiring someone else to build it for you in no code, it's probably gonna cost either a quarter or half of the price of what traditional coders would be able to quote you for it. The second pro is that it is way quicker to build leveraging no-code tools. Usually it's about 1/4 the time than traditional coding might take. And so you could essentially take any number of months that it would take to build something leveraging code, like with full code, building it out that way, and you could divide that by 4, so just call it weeks, right? So if something takes 8 months to be able to build leveraging code, then you can expect it to take about 8 weeks, maybe 6 to 8 weeks to build it leveraging no-code tools. And when the market is very quickly developing and windows of opportunity literally open up and close relatively rapidly, speed is super important. Now, to add to that, you have to understand that when you first launch that first product in that market, so that an app, a website, there will be a very big difference between what you had in your mind and what the customer actually wants, right? We're gonna have to make those adaptations when we get to market. And so one of the smart ways of doing that is going quickly, seeing what the market needs once you present it with a first product, and then being able to adapt along with their specific needs and the specific things that they're willing to pay for, right? Because in the end of the day, we're building a business. Now here's the third pro for no code. Essentially, you can build things as a non-technical entrepreneur. So what do I mean by this? Well, if you were to build things with code, you would need a larger team of people, and usually all of them would have to be relatively technical. You would need to have a front-end developer to build sort of the design side of things, maybe someone who's building the back end of the applications, the server side, the database, all of that. And then you would still need to have a product manager coordinating, designers. You might even have someone who's specifically designing the workflows and middleware. And with no-code tools, you can literally have all of that with one person. So one person who's creating the designs, creating the logic behind the designs, and it allows you alone and as a non-technical person to launch platforms. So it's really night and day. And when we think that 99.7% of the population does not know how to program or code or whatever you want to call it, that means that it is a huge benefit for people who are non-technical to be able to build software in this way. And frankly, I know that it's the future of the workforce and education too. We'll put that aside for a second. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel already, please do so. It makes our heart warm and it makes us continue to create awesome content for you for free. Awesome, now let's talk about some cons. The first con is that you cannot build everything. Now I say everything because there is so much that you can build, but there are some things that are just not well suited for building out with no code. So for example, if you're trying to build blockchain infrastructure, there are really no tools today that are really at the point at which they're trustworthy to build infrastructure with Web3 decentralized apps, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there are early stages of companies doing this, simply not there yet. Then, virtual reality. You probably will need to have actual developers building something out if you need to build out virtual reality worlds. No code simply doesn't yet have the best tools to be able to build those things. So that's often been an argument that people say that you're not really capable of creating serious things leveraging no code. But if you look at the other side of things, in 2010, you could only build landing pages and basic websites, maybe an online store. Now you can build marketplaces like Airbnb. You can build apps like Uber. You can build Netflix. You can build social medias like Facebook or Twitter. You can build membership portals. You can build SaaS platforms. You can build so many different things. And so the question really is, what parts of my startup am I going to be building 100% with no code? And if there are some things that can't be built with no code, then I can build them with code. And so really understanding that it is a spectrum, that you can combine code and no code. And the funny thing is that early on, when you're testing your idea, validating, when you're building out that first customer experience and getting to your first $1 million in revenue, you don't necessarily need to build super complex software. The second con, no code is a means to an end. It is not an end in and of itself. So what do I mean by that? 90% of all apps in the iOS store are zombie apps, meaning that people don't use them. And so the biggest problem, whether you're building with code or without code, is the fact that you're usually building something that people don't want, are not going to use, or not willing to pay for. And so oftentimes when people are trying to build a business, they simply think, hey, I have this idea for an app, I need to build it out, I need to find a developer, without realizing that there's a whole methodology around building startups. And if you ignore the methodology of building a business, then you're just building products like everyone else that no one is using. And so that's where we really stress the importance of learning startup methodology to be able to launch your startup. We have a full program around this at wearenocode.com. You can check it out. But basically, there is step-by-step curriculum that allows you to go about validating your ideas, getting your first paying customers, and being able to scale from there or decide what the next route is for you. So in the end of the day, no code is an awesome tool. It's innovative, you can drag and drop functionalities and build incredible things. But if you're not focused on your end goal, you're still out there just building in a corner and not delivering value. Now remember, the reason why we're building products is because those products can scale the value that we deliver to an end customer. So try to figure out what your end goal is, and if it's building a business, then no code is gonna be amazing for 30% of what you have to do, which is building that first product, building a scalable software solution. Awesome. Now the third con about no code is that there are so many tools out there, and so many people spend a lot of time trying to figure out which is the right tool for them. They end up trying to build out their entire end product, and so they usually go towards the more complex no-code tools to get started. And that's where people get caught up. There are tools which allow you to build super complex software, but if you start from there and try to learn how to run before you learn how to walk, you might get very frustrated with the early results that you get because you just feel like when you might have taken that 1 year of coding school, this is not for me. And so the fact that people are getting distracted by all these tools and choosing the most difficult ones, it basically means that it is not helping people like yourself who might have an awesome business idea but just don't know how to get started to launch their startups the quickest way possible, to test the market quickly, understand what people are willing to pay for, and build a business around that. And if you have an idea but you don't know how to get started, you can check out our free course right below where we go through the step-by-step of how to launch your startup as a non-technical entrepreneur. Now, there's a couple other things that I see a lot of entrepreneurs being really caught up with early stage. They want to make sure that this startup, that this product, that this app is super scalable to begin with. And no-code tools allow you to build software that can scale to hundreds of thousands of people. There are people who build platforms like Comment that it is at $800,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Entrepreneurs that have leveraged no-code to be able to build a startup, bring it to 30K in MRR, and scale it from there. Regardless of whether you're building something with code or without code, you're going to need to adapt that product as you scale to millions of people. So being worried early stage, when you're probably at the idea stage and probably don't have hundreds of paying customers, about the future scalability of your product is you getting ahead of yourself. And early stage, we need to find out the next step that you can take to reach your end goal. Usually we start off with simple products, we launch them to the market, we test, we iterate, we keep in parallel building more complex features that are going to satisfy our customers, and that's the way that we want to build scalable startups. Now, another thing people talk about is cybersecurity. I'll tell you, you are going to be much more cyber secure leveraging no-code technologies because these larger companies are investing in penetration tests, getting hackers to try to hack into the system so they can figure out what's going wrong. And so they are putting measures in place to protect you and themselves, right? And so it's gonna be much more cyber secure leveraging no-code platforms than it will working with a small team of 1 or 2 developers who are usually gonna be way more feature focused than making sure that it is highly cyber secure. So for cybersecurity, again, it's another myth, it's another thing that people constantly push back on, and it's a real big reason why a lot of people are not getting into no-code. But I just wanna let you know that that is not the case. And of course, by now you've realized that I am 100% about building your startups leveraging no-code, even if at some point you need to have code in that startup too. It's the quickest way, it is cheaper, and it's going to make you see much more progress that ultimately brings you to a successful startup. So, hope you enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, see you in the next one. Take care.